Jay Shogren here, and we are going to talk about economics and defining economics and what the role of economics is in the modern world. So this is lecture one, and we'll get started. So when I say what is economics, I have a very specific definition of it. Economics is the value of how to create value by trade, or simply creating value by trade, where the key words are value created and trade, obviously, and they have very specific meanings in economics. What this means, value created by trade, it means win-win, a gain in the size of the economic pie, not just a transfer of one piece of pie from me to you where the pie stays the same. No, this is the idea of an economy, and it's a little, it's straightforward to get your head wrapped around unless you're stuck in what we call the zero-sum world. And the zero-sum world is when I win, you lose. If I win 10, you lose 10. Or if you win 100, I lose 100. That's a zero-sum mentality. Win-lose, sporting event. I win, you lose. In economics, it's all about trade so that we both win. Well, how does that work? Well, value in economics is not price times quantity, right? So if you think about something, price times quantity represents total revenue. If I sell 100 bottles of beer at $10, my total revenue is $1,000. But that's not what we mean by value, and it's not what we mean by economic value. And we're going to get into this in detail. But the idea is that the buyer gets value because they were willing to pay more than $10 for this beer. And so their value is the fact that, well, I would have paid 15. So I paid 10, I saved 5. That's the value to me. The seller would have sold it for, say, 6 at a bare minimum, but they sold it for 10, so they gained 4. So that's the value to the sellers, right? So the whole idea being that it's win-win. And it's created by, in the sense that we have a market, we have marketplaces, we have stores, we have the internet, we have every place where you can buy and sell things. And economists study these exchange institutions, it's the fancy name for markets or bartering or trade or anything, to understand how to set up the rules so that we can have more trades go on, so that we can create more value. And by creating more value, what that means is a higher standard of living. Translates into a higher standard of living for both the sellers and the buyers. So let's go through it and think about it. Right? So what does value mean? Economic value, it means more well-being for the person. So if I could buy that beer for $10 and I was willing to pay 15, well, that frees up $5 for me to spend on something else. I get more value because now I've got $5 extra rather than you being able to sell it to me for 15. Right? So you've got market values in terms of exchange. And the same can be said for non-market values. When you pay an entrance fee, say $5 to go hiking up in the snowy range out in Centennial at say Corner Mountain or Sugarloaf, and you would have paid $20 to go hiking up there, but you only had to pay $5. That's, again, value to you because that's 15 extra dollars you can spend on something else. Right? So that's how you create value. And by efficiency in economics, what we're talking about is getting the most value per unit of cost. So if I can go out and buy beer for $3 instead of 10, and I'm still willing to pay 15, well, now my value is increased now from 5 to 12, right? 15 minus 3 is 12. So we're constantly looking for competition and trades and for the market to be working so that sellers have an incentive to keep costs low. Buyers have an incentive to look for sellers with low costs. And people have an incentive to innovate, right? To try to find ways to produce goods that people want at a cheaper price. But the key is win-win. The key is value created by trade is win-win. Both the buyers and the sellers lose. It's not a zero-sum game. And if you think of the world as a zero-sum game, then you're not really doing economics. Now you're doing more like just bargaining over a fixed size of the pie. But that's not what we're up to. You know, we're up to trying to understand how far we can push the idea of win-win. Right? So created by, and this again is win-win, and the key here is productivity. So output per unit of labor, that's what productivity means. Output per unit of labor. And we have capital, which is machinery, infrastructure, all the physical type things that we have, human capital, natural capital, social capital, all the different institutions that are involved in an economy. And we have labor, which is us, and us investing our sweat and our time and our effort to try to produce it. So when we say that an economy is more productive, what we mean by that is just like what it sounds. We're able to produce more value for the same amount of labor. And how do we do that? Well, that's with technology and research and development, R&D, where we're able to come up with new cost-effective ways to produce things. So, I mean, if you think back when I was in college, TVs then were monstrous. Either you had a small black and white or you had this gigantic, 2 feet thick, big tube screen that would cost you a year's salary to buy. Well, not that much, but maybe 3 months' salary to buy. Nowadays, you can get a TV screen on a watch that you can wear on your wrist or on your phone, etc. Right? So these changes in technologies are able to deliver things that we want at a lower cost. And they can be produced either here in the US or they can be produced somewhere else, like China, like India, like Europe, South America, all around the globe. And the notion is that we're able to create value by finding these lower cost technologies to people who want to buy these services. Again, it's driven by the institutions in place, and usually by institutions we mean political institutions like property rights. That's what we're usually thinking about. Property rights meaning that those who produce the goods get the profits. They pay some in tax in order to have infrastructure so that we can create more profits. So it's just a price you pay for civilized society is the taxes. But the whole idea is you have institutions and rules to make sure the incentives are aligned. If you take away the incentives so that if you are coming up with a good idea but you don't get the profits, well, then you stop coming up with good ideas. You go find something else to do with your time. And that is why capitalism as an organizing economic system has been so powerful. Because capitalism tries to align property rights and institutions such that those with a good idea make the profit, right? It doesn't always work, but that's the idea, to get you to work harder and think up better ideas in order that you can win and the buyer can win and you can compete with other sellers. So again, we're talking about a positive sum. Positive sum just means win-win, not zero sum. We both gain from this trade. Then trade, what we're thinking about here is just exchange. I buy, you sell, I buy. And what we're doing is we're moving low valued uses of a product to high valued uses. You know, you go buy a pair of shoes and they're willing to sell that price $100 and you are willing to pay that. What it means is that the product is moved from a low value use sitting on the shelf to your feet and you're walking around town. So the whole idea is we're trying to design markets, auctions, bargaining, barter, sharing rules, gifts, coordination of activities, so that the whole purpose is to move low valued uses to high valued uses. That is the way we create value. So again, value created by trade. That's my definition of economics. That is the definition we'll use all semester long. And that is the one I want you to think about. Now, my guarantee on the quiz, I will ask you to explain value created by trade. So if you don't understand my discussion right now in this first part of lecture 1, send me an email. I can expand upon it. We will illustrate exactly what it means and how we calculate it as economists. But the whole notion of economics is because it's a social science. It's not an individual science like psychology. It's a social science. And the big question here is, how do we make 7 billion people better off by buying and selling different products, or by conserving rather than developing different landscapes, or by, it really does boil down to things really that basic. Win-win, not a zero-sum game. All right, I'm going to stop right there, and I will pick up on this lecture in the next YouTube.